And now to Iran, where the regime again today raised the ante against Washington and the West. A top Iranian military commander said Iran would preemptively strike at any country it perceives as a threat. Now, the warning comes on the same day Iran announced it would not allow UN inspectors inside nuclear facilities suspected of developing weapons. Instead, they offered to hold discussions about them in Tehran. Now, as a reminder, the IAEA said back in November, quote, the information indicates that Iran has carried out activities relevant to the development of a nuclear explosive device. So now the specter of preemption is out there. There's no access to Iran's nuclear centers. And it comes as Iran has cut off oil supplies to Britain and France and says it will do the same to 6 other European countries. So how is the U.S. responding? Well, this is where it gets really interesting. We've noticed something here, and it's a very mixed response. You may remember that earlier this month, the Washington Post's David Ignatius reported that Defense Secretary Leon Panetta believed there was a strong likelihood that Israel would attack Iran this spring. The President of the United States was also very clear in an interview with Matt Lauer.
We're not going to take any options off the table, and I've been very clear that we're going to do everything we can to prevent Iran from getting a nuclear weapon and creating an arms race, a nuclear arms race in a volatile region.
Iran's believed desire to have a weapon is why Iran's nuclear centrifuges were attacked with the Stuxnet virus, which is credited with setting back the country's nuclear program. It is also why the United States has imposed crippling sanctions on Iran. A source who wrote and implemented those sanctions was talking me through them today, most of them explicitly designed to target Iran's nuclear and military industries. So there's been a change. On February 14th, maybe in honor of Valentine's Day, Leon Panetta said he never thought Israel would attack Iran that soon. And here's Joint Chief Chairman Martin Dempsey on Sunday about the most fundamental justification for the sanctions themselves, whether Iran is actually on that path to build a nuclear weapon.
I believe it is unclear, and on that basis, I think it would be premature to exclusively decide that the time for a military option was upon us. I mean, I think that the economic sanctions and the international cooperation that we've been able to gather around sanctions is beginning to have an effect. I think our diplomacy is having an effect, and our preparedness.
Up front tonight, former Defense Secretary William Cohen. Good to be with you, sir.
Good to be with you.
So what's going on here?
I don't think there's any question but Iran is building a nuclear weapons capability. I mean, we talk about circumstantial evidence. The footprint of guilt can be traced by the searchlight of probability. What is the probability you have a country that would take 18, 19, 20 years to construct a nuclear power capability if it was only interested in producing electrical energy or building pharmaceutical capability? It's simply inconsistent with probabilities and human experience. So they're on their way. The question is, how far along are they? And I think what's happened in recent days and weeks, the rhetoric has been ratcheted up to the point where we might, in fact, see a precipitous action being taken either by the Israelis or by the Iranians, unleashing untoward consequences. People can't even really comprehend the full scope of what those consequences would be. So I think what the administration is now trying to do is to ratchet the rhetoric back.
To walk back from having to strike or something like that.
Indeed. And you really can't have it both ways, however.
Yeah.
If you're going to say that we're intensifying the sanctions because they're getting closer, as the IAEA has said, if you're saying we need to have more sanctions, that really kind of goes counter to the argument now, saying, well, we've really been successful, and therefore you would then be faced with the argument, well, isn't it time to back off a bit?
Well, that's because it would seem to be consistent. If indeed it's not just rhetoric, which it appears you're saying it is just rhetoric, but if it's not just rhetoric and something's changed, then the sanctions themselves would not seem to be justifiable. Certainly none of these other strikes and things that have happened, whether it be the computer virus or other things targeting nuclear facilities either.
I think the sanctions have been effective, and I think it's really important that we continue to intensify them. And if we don't get Russian and Chinese support, then I think the possibility or probability of military action moves very close to the center of the table. And I don't think most people don't want to see that take place. I think the Israelis don't want to see it take place, nor the American people.
And I think that would be extremely clear, that nobody would want that. And looking at recent experience of what has happened, and Iran is a vastly different place than that. But what are those options? I mean, you had Secretary of Defense Panetta and President Obama meeting behind closed doors. I know that they have put forth a plan, obviously, to Congress of how they would go ahead if they had to. Can they surgically strike without having a broader conflict?
I think the short answer is no. This is not a surgical strike kind of event. You would have to have multiple strikes over a fairly significant period of time to do the kind of damage that needs to be done.
And they would strike back?
They're not going to go gently into that good night. They're going to strike back with asymmetric types of warfare. They could call upon Lebanon to rain down on Tel Aviv with rockets. You could have the launching of missiles coming out of Iran. I mean, this could spread very quickly to the entire region. That's why we have to continue the approach, I think, that President Obama has taken. Let's continue the sanctions. Let's intensify them. Let's bring the Iranians back to the table on our terms and not on theirs.
Do you think that the outcome of this may be, and I know I always ask this question, but it seems, when you look around the world, there's a lot of countries that have nuclear weapons that aren't necessarily supposed to have them. India, say, comes to mind, and they have them. Mm-hmm. Is it more reasonable, if nobody wants a full war, which nobody does, that you would just say, look, Iran's going to become nuclear. Let's deal with that.
Well, you could have a situation where you deter Iran from using nuclear weapons.
So they get one, but you deter.
Here's the problem. Yeah. If Iran has nuclear weapons, I think it's very clear. Saudi Arabia will go next. They will think that they need them, and then you'll have other countries in the region that will need them. And so you're seeing the proliferation of nuclear weaponry. That means somebody at some point will have a better chance of getting their hands on nuclear materials and blowing up one of them, either in the United States, in Europe, in Israel, in the region. That's the danger involved, and so we want to see a control of the spread of nuclear weapons, not yield to the pressure to have other countries pick them up.
All right, Secretary Cohen, thank you very much. Appreciate your taking the time.
Good to be with you.